Trump does not bring out the best in the people he appeals to, but he also does not bring out the best in his enemies. I don't think anything in American politics is psychologically healthy right now. And I don't think Trump opposition is trending in psychologically healthy directions. And this brings us back to this final piece of the Trump-Russia stuff, which is the ways in which liberals want to believe the worst version of it's true, because it offers them a deus ex machina that they're not going to get otherwise. And you wrote this very eloquently. You wrote, "For more than 6 months now, Russia has served as a crutch for the American imagination. It used to explain how Trump could have happened to us, and it is also called upon to give us hope. When the Russian conspiracy behind Trump is finally fully exposed, our national nightmare will be over." And this is spun off on the left into a real sort of Russia conspiracy sphere. My colleague Zach Beecham has done really great work on this, but really wild ideas are getting circulated by, people who either were not considered credible a year ago and are, because they're so congenial being considered credible, and they're being amplified by people who just want to believe them. And I'm curious how you see the danger of that. You have been, I think, in your writing, very disturbed by this trend. And I think one version of looking at it is say, these are just people on Twitter going a little bit too far. But you think there's something that is more toxic here. And I'd like to hear how you think about it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you've come back to this because as I was thinking about this when we were talking about sort of the possible scenarios and the sort of the almost best case scenario, which is that Trump is just plagued and largely paralyzed by these allegations till the end of his first term, and then doesn't win re-election, in part because he's been so tainted by the Russia story. And that all sounds well and good until you stop to consider what kind of political culture we enter the post-Trump era with. I think it's impossible to underestimate how destructive Trump is to American politics, to American political institutions, but even more to culture and to language and to the way we talk about politics. I think that a lot of Americans are not finally attuned to this because, and this is another area in which I think, having lived in an autocracy gives me a kind of leg up, because I've also lived sort of through a failed recovery from an autocracy. And I know what that looks like. And when people are sort of breathing a sigh of relief, I think around the 100-day mark, saying, "Oh, well, he hasn't accomplished anything legislatively. It's all going to be okay." That's not what I would have been taking stock of. I would have been taking stock of what's happened to language, what's happened to political thought, what's happened to political debate. And some of the things that have happened certainly to journalism have been amazing, right? But some things have been really disturbing, like the proliferation of conspiracy theories on the left, like I think a larger mood of smearing politicians with the Russia brush. That taps into a long-time American political tradition, but there's nothing great about tapping into that tradition. There's nothing great in trafficking in that kind of political conversation. And it also doesn't move the anti-Trumpers in any direction except the anti-Trump direction, right? That's not enough to move on after Trump. There's no vision for what America can be if it's not run by President Trump. Where's the Democratic Party? Where are Democratic politicians? Where's the glorious future that they're going to bring us in place of the imaginary past that Trump has been promoting? None of that is there. None of it, as far as I know, is even being discussed because everybody is talking about how to get rid of this guy and how to use the Russia story to get rid of this guy more specifically.
So one of the things that I wonder about there is that on the one hand, I think to your point about where are the Democrats at the moment, I think the fact of being powerless and not having a campaign to focus attention, just sort of it almost doesn't matter what they do, right? I think they can say things about Russia. I think they can say things about healthcare, and it doesn't matter that much. But the place where what you say really resonates with me is Republicans engaged in this kind of conspiracy theorizing from much more powerful sources in their party and with much more indulgence from their elected officials during the Obama era. Trump himself was the prime progenitor and advocate of the birther conspiracy. And as it took root in the Republican Party, and as elected officials decided not to believe it, but to let it stand, to try to signal they're on the same side, even if they weren't going to follow up on it, it began exerting a sort of gravitational pull. And by 2016, you did have Republicans who were running on all kinds of visions for the country. Marco Rubio had some very interesting speeches about what he wanted to do on college and other things. But it was Trump who represented where the base had really moved to. And it was Trump who they were convinced, would fight for them, would lock Hillary Clinton up in jail, would build the wall, would do all these things that fit what had become their mindset and would become their core set of concerns. I don't think that's happening in the Democratic Party yet, but we're, whatever it is, 135 days into Trump or something. And this is a long time for people to be this angry and this scared. And the sort of rise of a conspiracy sphere has happened faster than I would have thought it would. There's been, I think, a little bit more quick pushback. But if the liberal base is persuaded of that, then it sort of won't matter because, there's one issue of are Democrats talking about other things, but there's the other issue of does their base want them to talk about other things? I think right now, more or less, they do. But if it became that they didn't, if it became the litmus test was believing, that Trump had to be impeached over sins that as of yet were unclear, although I think the obstruction of justice is very real even now. But if the litmus test became believing in the wilder versions of the Russian conspiracy, that would go in a bad direction.
I agree. And, I'm not talking about how the Democrats aren't talking about important legislation. I'm talking about something much bigger, which is, as I said, it's a vision of the future, right? I think that what ultimately made Trump so appealing was not just the conspiracy theories. I think, although I think you're right to point to them, it was his appeal to an imaginary past, right? To a time that none of us actually lived through and none of us remember, but we imagined that we felt comfortable in, or they imagined that they felt comfortable in, a simpler time. And meanwhile, the Democrats were, the Clinton campaign was saying, no, things are just fine the way they are, which is not actually the way you fight an imaginary past. The way you can fight an imaginary past is through a vision, and it has to be a vision of a glorious future. Or as historian Tim Snyder has put it, if you're going to fight somebody who makes up fictions and conspiracy theories, you have to be interesting, right? So legislation is not terribly interesting. But there has to be an interesting story. I'm sorry, I know I'm saying this to the wrong person. For a lot of people, legislation is not terribly interesting. I think it's fascinating, but you have to tell stories, right? Not stories about how we took stock and we realized that things are pretty good, which is sort of what the Clinton campaign was doing, but like amazing, imaginative, engaging stories that people can buy into. And conspiracy theories work that way, right? You can totally buy into a conspiracy theory and you immediately have community and you immediately have things to talk to people about. You immediately have ways to engage your imagination. But that is just deadly to the public sphere and, I think to the fabric of society.